So welcome to our webinar today on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Art Project Grants for fiscal year 2023, which for us is starting July 1st and runs through June 30th of 2023. I am Carolyn Koska. I'm the Grants Administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. And I'll just start here and run down what we're going to talk about today. I'll talk just briefly about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. We'll take a look at the guidelines for this grant program. We'll go over to our website and look at what resources are available for you there. Then we'll head into our grant system and walk through the application, and we'll finish up talking about the grant process, or what happens after you have submitted an application. And as I said, if you would stay muted for the most part here, we're going to stop a couple times for questions, and then of course you can unmute and ask your question, or feel free to put those in the chat as well. And then at the end, if you'd like to talk a little more about specific projects that you're thinking about, we can do that too. So Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMAC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. So our mission statement is kind of a mouthful there, but some of the things that we are committed to include supporting artists and arts organizations and their artistic endeavors, working to break down barriers to accessing the arts, instilling the arts into the community, supporting arts education for all ages, and supporting events and activities that represent the diverse ethnic and cultural arts traditions of the region. So here is our area down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. And our funding mostly comes from the state of Minnesota. We have an allocation from their general fund, along with the majority of the funding coming from the Arts and Cultural Heritage, or Legacy Fund. We also get some funding from the McKnight Foundation that we use for some of our grants for artists, along with memberships and donations from our region. So you do need to be located in our service region in order to apply. And in case you weren't able to see those tiny little counties on that picture, I'll just review. Those include Big Stone, Chippewa, Cottonwood, Jackson, Candy, Ojai, Lac-qui-Parle, Lincoln, Lyon, McLeod, Meeker, Murray, Nobles, Pipestone, Redwood, Renville, Rock, Swift, and Yellow Medicine counties, along with tribal lands within that service area. And we acknowledge that this region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. So types of organizations that can apply for these grants: they are open to nonprofit organizations who would have a 501c3 status, units of government, which would be like a city or county government or tribal government, and then public schools that are doing a community project as opposed to activities within the school. If you are not a 501c3 profit at the moment, your organization may be kind of new or unincorporated, you still can apply, but you need to use a fiscal sponsor. And a fiscal sponsor is an organization who does fit our parameters for eligible organizations, but who is agreeing to sort of act as your sponsor, literally. They will receive your funds for you and manage them. So they're kind of taking on the responsibility for that grant, since your organization is not, does not have full nonprofit status. So if you are in that situation, you will need to include in your application your agreement with that fiscal sponsor organization that'll spell out how bills are being paid, et cetera, and also a signature from that organization. So this art project grant program, we are wanting it to encourage the creation, performance, and appreciation of the arts. And there are all kinds of projects that can fit under this program. This is just kind of, it covers the main things here, but certainly not exhaustive. You could have music or dance performances or theater, and all of these could be either put on by community groups or brought into the community. Art exhibits, readings, art classes, smaller public art, or arts festivals. So that's kind of the range of what we are looking at there. And these grants are available for up to $7,000. And in this current year, fiscal year 23, there are no matching funds required, which means that as long as your project costs less than the amount that you can request, your organization will not need to put up any funding toward that or find any other funding. In the past, we have required organizations to cover in some way 20% of the total project cost. And we have been kind of waiving that during COVID times. So our board decided to not require the match again for this year. Don't know what's going to happen in the future, but take advantage of that. Just a few eligibility things to be aware of what we can't fund with these. Obviously, projects that don't have an art focus, something that is for profit, whether the project is or the applicant is a business, things like that. Through this grant, we can't fund educational projects within a school system. We encourage you to go check out our Arts in the Schools grants if that's what you're looking for. We can't fund activities that take place outside of Minnesota. We are using state funds for these grants, and that is a condition of using these funds. Your activities will need to be open to the public. There can't be religious socialization of the participants or audience. We can't fund fundraising events, which means that these grants are here to help your project break even, not to make a profit. We also can't fund payments of debts incurred before your grant begins. You can't use these grant funds as a match for another grant from us. If your organization is already receiving operating support from us, you can't include prorated operating type costs in this budget. And we also can't fund applicants that have outstanding past due final reports. So that's kind of an overview of guidelines for this program. I would suggest that you read through the guidelines in full, and we'll take a look at where you can find those a little later. We have 3 deadlines for this program during this year. The first one is coming up on July 27th for projects starting September 1st or later. Our round 2 has a deadline of December 7th for projects starting February 1st or later, and then round 3, March 22nd, for projects starting May 1st or later. And a note that all of these deadlines you need to submit by 4:30 p.m. The system will not allow you to submit after that time. So it's a good idea to think through your project schedule to really decide what makes the best sense, what's the best deadline for you. So things to think about when you're choosing that project start date, and again, being aware of the earliest one that's allowed. You can't start any project activities before that start date. And those activities include things like any advertising, auditions, or any spending of money toward your grant project. So it is, again, really helpful to figure out if your project will align, the timeline will align with a particular deadline. If you do have some costs that absolutely have to be paid before that earliest start date, for instance, if you had a down payment towards an artist contract that you were bringing in, for instance, that amount that you're paying could not be included in your project budget. It would have to happen totally separate from this grant. Then you need a project end date as well. As it says here, give yourself time to complete and evaluate the project. It's better to give yourself more time, and it's fine if you're done early, but just make sure you have plenty of time to do what you want to do. Everything that is awarded this year needs to be finished up by June 30th of 2024. There are 2 roles that you'll need to assign people to, and these do need to be 2 different people. You'll need a project director, which is just whoever is really running the project and most involved. And then you'll also need an authorizing official, which is somebody from your organization who has authorizing power. You might find that maybe the president of your organization is acting as project director. That does happen pretty frequently, but in that case, then as authorizing official, you could have somebody like your treasurer. But again, those need to be 2 different people, and they will both need to sign off on everything related to the grant. And we will pause now for some questions. I'll check if there was anything in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question.
In your conversation there, you had said something about before the, not to expend money before the start date, and you said something about if you brought in another artist or something. I kind of missed what the point was there. Could you repeat that?
Sure. So that was just talking about what costs you can include in your grant budget. So normally we tell you no costs happening before that start date could be included in your budget. However, if you had something like, if let's say you're doing a concert series or something and you need to sort of make a down payment on a contract with a band that you're bringing in, and they need that before the earliest allowed start date, you could pay that to them, but then you couldn't include that amount in your grant budget.
Oh, okay. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't come up very often, but just something to note.
Is something like a filmmaking, film documentation, videography kinds of things, would that be allowable?
Sure.
Okay.
And I see a question in the chat. Will we be receiving guidelines and information that would be helpful regarding budget planning along with the application? We'll take a look at some more information as we go along here. And hopefully that will answer the questions that you have. And just a note that we are recording today, and you'll all be notified when this recording is available for you. All right, then I think we will head on over to our website. So here is our website. And as we're just on the home page here, I'm going to point out the fastest place to get to our grant system is here on the home page. If you scroll down below those slides, there's this black grants box with a login button. So that'll be a quick place to get back to that. So as we come in here, I'm first going to point out to you this workshops and assistance page. And this just lists kind of all the ways to get help with your application. We've got some Q&A sessions planned here. You can schedule some time with me. And we've also have listed here all of the grant workshops going forward. And as we complete these, there'll then be a recording link here. So that's a good page to check if you need some help. But we're going to head over now to our page for art project grants. And here up at the top is another place where you can access the grant system. This just takes you to the login screen also. And you'll see for each of these pages for our grant programs, we have materials that you need. We have grant guidelines here. We have the applications that are in a Word document. Some people like to work in that first for their draft and then paste everything into the system later. So that's available for you if you'd like to do that. We've got a budget form here, and we'll also take a look at that when we're in the application. We have the scoring criteria that the review panel will use to score your application. And even the final report questions are available for you there just to get an idea of what you might need to report on. Then we have all of those deadline dates that we were talking about, along with some other important dates. Also, we will post today's recording of the webinar back here as well. But all of these have a date for you to request a draft review from us, the deadline, when the panel will be scoring, when our board is making final decisions, and then that earliest project start date. So we've got that for each of the rounds for this program, and then just some information on some alternative ways to apply, along with a video tutorial for the online grant system. So we are going to just head on over to the grant system by clicking that Apply Now button. If you are have already worked in the system, you can of course just log in. If you are new, you can create a new account here. And if you're not sure whether you or someone from your organization already has an account here, please talk to us and we can get that figured out for you, and then you won't end up with a bunch of extra accounts. But I am just going to log in here. All right. So when you log in, you will come to your dashboard. And on that, you will see anything active going on that you have. Normally, if you're coming into this for the very first time, you'll be taken straight to this apply screen. So we're going to head over there. And this just lists all of the grant programs we currently have open. And you can either preview an application, so you can just look at it without actually starting anything, or click the apply button. So now we're in the application, and I'm just going to point out a couple of handy buttons at the top. If you need to be working in a different language, you can choose that here. It'll translate all the questions for you, and you can go ahead and type in your answers in that language. We have our copy previous answers button. And this is if you have done an application in the system before, it can grab all of the answers that are the same between that that are for the same questions between that application and this new one. So that can be really handy, especially copying over some of your just regular organization information that doesn't change. Then we have the collaborate button, and this is a way for you to ask someone else to be working on the application with you. You're able to just email them, choose what level of permissions you like to give them on the application. You can give them a little message here saying, can you fill in the audience numbers, or can you proof this? And you can invite them. They will get an email, and if they're not already in the system, they will just need to create a password to come in here and be able to work on the application with you. That can be really helpful, especially for when you're doing signatures later. Again, a couple ways to get help as you are working on this. You'll need to have a name for your project. There are some examples here, nothing fancy, just so we know and you know which one this is. And then you'll enter in the amount you're going to request, but you'll want to wait until you do your budget form, probably to enter that amount in. Then as a reminder, we've got the guidelines and scoring criteria here again for you. That Word document with the application questions again, along with a couple other tips. And I will just talk briefly about this one about character limits. Most of the fields have a pretty big limit for how many characters you can put in there, and we are not expecting you to necessarily come anywhere near that in your answer. So please don't feel like you need to pad things out to use up all of those characters. Okay, you will start out describing your project, and it reminds you of some other details you're going to talk about later, so you don't have to put everything here.
And she's going to resubmit it, and she's going to be right until Monday to do it.
If everyone could please mute again.
Okay, so just a heads up that she may resubmit.
So here's where you would enter in your start date and end date that we talked about, and it reminds you of the rules around that. Then we have a space for you to enter in details about events that are part of your project. So we can take this information and put it on our area arts calendar. Then you're going to be looking at
you got one?
your artists and
Okay.
the again, could we all please mute? So we're looking at the artistic quality and merit section, which you will find is one of the criteria you're being scored on. So you'll talk about sort of your artistic vision for the project, which artists you've chosen, why did you choose them, or why did you choose a particular theater production or concert program, for instance. Just how did you make those choices? Then for the artists involved, you will need to have either their artist resume or a bio from them about their training and accomplishments. And it does say here, if you don't know who that's going to be yet, you can include your job description, what you're looking for. Definitely people score much better if they have all of these people pinned down at the time of applying. But you've got some spots to upload some resumes or bios. Then we ask for samples of those artists' work. It's got some parameters here for different media, whether that's written, images, audio, video, and you've got a bunch of places to upload. So there's a bunch of fields there. Now you've also got some places to put some links along with describing what those are going to be. Our next section is about reaching the underserved. We're looking for you to identify groups in your community that are underserved or underrepresented. As it says here, they may be defined by race or ethnicity, language, socioeconomic level, ability, etc. And then how are you going to reach out to or involve at least one of those groups in your project? How are you going to specifically invite them or have them participate? So we are looking here for something more than, well, our events are open to everybody. We are looking, in fact, for a specific thing that you are going to be doing. And then also just asking you about accessibility and how you are going to ensure that your project will be accessible to those with various disabilities. And please think beyond just mobility here. Then we're looking at impact of your project. Why is it important? Does it meet particular needs of the community? And then what impact do you expect this is going to have on your community or organization? And here we're looking for you to come up with specific changes that you're looking for, whether it's in participants' skills, knowledge, attitude, behavior, etc. And then how do you plan to measure or prove that those changes have taken place? How are you gathering results or feedback? And it is important to make sure that those changes that you say you're looking for, that whatever your method of measuring actually looks for those things, you want those to match up. So often we will see people say something like, we are wanting our audience members to have a new knowledge and appreciation of this new to them musical genre. And then they have their survey sitting there and it's all about what is your age, how far did you drive to get here, how did you hear about us? So that you really have to connect those pieces together and be actually measuring the thing that you are looking for. So here, if you are using something like a survey, you can upload that here. And estimated audience numbers or participants for the project. Then we're looking at kind of your ability to accomplish the project. For this key personnel here, if you have somebody else besides the artist that has a really big role, if for instance you hired someone as your project director, you can include their information and resume here, and it's okay for this question to say, no, we don't have anyone else in a large role in this project. It's really all the artists, that's fine. Then we are just asking some information about your planning and publicity timelines. What are you planning to do with that? What kind of support you have from the community? Do you have donations? Do you have people volunteering, offering space, etc.? Then we come to budget, and you have a couple options here. One, we have an Excel budget form that you can use. And you also have the option to just create your own budget if there's something that works better for your organization. But we're going to take a look at this Excel budget form. So you can put either your organization name or project title up here. And then here under cash costs, you can start listing your expenses. We'll put some amounts in here. Oops. So that will be totaling for you here. And then you can put in some other funding, which would be if you have any ticket sales or you're getting donations from other people, or you're putting up some just of your own cash from your organization. That can go here. We'll put something in there, and then it calculates for you the amount that you can request. It tells you your request cannot exceed 3,900, which was our cash cost minus our total other funding. So it can't exceed this amount or the maximum request amount, whichever is less. So we find art project here, and our 3,900 is less than 7,000. So that's how much we can request. And then there's this double check at the bottom here. And we are wanting your profit to equal 0, like we talked about before. So let's say this project is a little more expensive. And now it tells us our profit, we're losing $6,000. That's not good. So we're going to double check over here. And this says this time it can't exceed 9,900, the art project max amount. So this time we'd have to choose 7,000. But it tells us, oh no, we're still losing 2,900. So then you'd need to come up with something else in income. So that's just a little double check to make sure you have everything covered there. So then once you had saved and finished that, you can upload that here. There is a spot for some narrative. If there's something, more details you want to explain, like how you came up with some of the numbers. Like for instance, if you're paying somebody at a certain rate for so many hours, things like that. Then this next part is just about your organization, your mission statement, brief history, what kind of programs you offer, who do you generally serve, and then some information about your board, just how it operates, how do you make sure it represents the diversity of your community. And then we're also wanting you to provide the names and roles and qualifications of your board members. And you can either add that also to this text box or upload an existing board list. Now we just got some data collection. And this is some information that we just passed along to the state. They want to know what was your most recently completed fiscal year. So for a lot of you, I'm guessing that probably 2021, depending on how your year runs. You'll choose an organization type here. And then it'll pop up a question about your expenses, depending on which one you chose. So it's just looking for arts organizations, total expenses for the year. For non-arts, it'll ask for total arts expenses for the year. And again, depending on your type of organization, that might be 0, and that's okay. Again, just information that we are passing along. Some demographic information, how many people you generally serve in a year, and this would correspond with this fiscal year that you entered up here. And then some contact information. Here's where you put information for your project director, your authorizing official, who the grant writer is in case we need to contact you, have questions about your organization or application. And then here you can say whether you are using a fiscal sponsor for this project. If you are, then you'll have space to enter information about them. And this is where you would attach that agreement that you have with that organization, and finish up with some digital signatures by typing your name in. Again, this is a good place to use that collaborate button if, for instance, you need to invite your fiscal sponsor to come in here and sign. Right, so you can save your application here or submit if you're ready. We're going to hit save. It is auto saving while you're working on this, but if you hit the actual save button, it'll give you kind of a list of what you still need to do yet. And since we didn't do anything, we have everything listed here, but that just can help you track your progress. And you'd hit continue to go back to working on your application, but we're going to click home again to get back to our dashboard. And now here is this art project application that we just started. And if you want to get back into it, you would just click edit application here. So this is the same place that you would come back to if you got a grant and you needed to, say, come in and sign your contract or work on your final report. There's an example down here. So that is our grant system and the application. So we can stop again for a little bit for some questions. Anything I can answer at this point?
Say, Carolyn, how big, so say for the project, how big of an impact? I mean, if you had 4 or 5 participants, is that enough to merit, or are you looking for something bigger? Would they get a score higher if there's more participants, or what about that?
I would say generally you would score higher if there are more participants to a certain extent. I would think if it's just a few people, that might not go over so well.
Mm-hmm.
But what if the impact of, there's the initial interaction or the development of the project, and then there would be through a viewing, a greater number of people would be impacted by.
Yeah, you would need a way to figure out how many more people were being impacted and get some feedback from them in some way. So you'd need to allow a little more time to do that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question here in chat. If we log in, we can view questions prior to actually completing the application. Yes, there was that preview button on the application page, but you can also look at them. They are just posted on our website in that Word document. So there are a couple ways that you can take a look. And we are going to continue on here. Just some tips for you as you're working on this. We already kind of talked about you need to kind of think ahead to choose the best round for your project. So let's say you were applying in the December, like the December deadline might be a good date for kind of anything happening late spring during the summer. So kind of thinking that far ahead. If you're doing something early fall, you probably want to be looking at our round 3. Like for the next year, it'd be pretty cutting it kind of close with that September 1 start date, applying in this first round, but it just kind of depends on what's your project. But anyway, kind of try to think through what makes the best sense for when you want to apply. Make sure to read through the guidelines carefully and those criteria. We don't want you to, fill out a whole application and then discover that there was something that was not eligible. So please make sure to do that first and contact us if you have questions about that. It's also good to start working on your application early, especially if you're trying to get information from artists involved, or if you find you're going to need some help putting together the work samples, or just have questions as you're working on the application. So give yourself plenty of time. You'll have noticed that most of the questions in the application had a bunch of sub questions. So make sure that you're like fully reading that and touching on each of those sub questions. There definitely are ones where you could answer multiple parts of the question in one sentence, so don't feel like you have to repeat yourself there for the other bullet, but just make sure you're covering all of those. We talked a little bit about this as well. Just keep your answers real clear and concise. No need to try to pad things out, or also no need to think you need to use some kind of special grant language in writing this. Using everyday language is just fine. It's also really good to assume that the grant reviewers don't know anything about your organization or your project. We are drawing panelists from around our whole region, so it is likely that they have not heard of you and what you do. So just watch for things like acronyms that you aren't spelling out, or programs you're mentioning that you're not explaining. It's a good idea to have somebody who's not fully involved in what you're doing read through your project, and they can kind of catch some of those things that you might not catch. And finally, this is a big one. Don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions on anything during this process. We are here to help you, and I don't know how many times we've gotten some application and seen maybe some eligibility issue and said, if only they had talked to us. So please reach out with any questions you might have. And there are, again, multiple ways to get help. If you want to talk through your project before you even get started to make sure you're applying under the right grant, for instance, and we can answer any questions you have with the application. We also can review your application ahead of time. If you have a draft ready and let us know, we can take a look and let you know if you're missing something, or we were looking for a different kind of answer, things like that. And there was a date on the website for each round, kind of the deadline for asking for that review. So be aware of that. Another reason to start early. So what happens after you submit your application? First of all, we as the staff review it for eligibility and completeness. And if there's anything at that point that's missing or a question about eligibility, we'll contact you, and you'll have 48 hours to fix whatever the issue is. Then the whole round of grants will go on to our panel of individuals from around the region, and they will discuss and score those applications based on the criteria for the program, which we'll look at in a second. So they have those scores, and then those go on to our board, who makes the final funding decision based on those recommendations. So the criteria for this grant program, half of your score will be the artistic quality and merit of the project. So a lot of that is the artist info, the samples. So that's really important. Then they'll also look at the impact on the participants and audience, worth 22% of your score. They'll look at what you're doing to reach the underserved, 14% of your score, and your ability to accomplish the project, which will be things like, does the budget make sense? Does the timeline make sense? Do you have the right people? Also 14% of your score. So if you look at the sheet that was linked in a couple of different places here with the scores for this program, or the criteria, there are a bunch of bullet points that go into more detail under each of these, so you can get a little better idea of what they are looking for. So then after the panel scores, but before it goes to the board, there's an opportunity to have a couple additional percentage points added to your score. If you are a first-time applicant to us, if your organization is led by or primarily serving BIPOC or LGBTQ communities or people with disabilities, or if you're from a county that hasn't received as much money from us lately. So those will be added on at that point and then go to the board for that final decision. If your grant is awarded, you'll have 30 days to complete your contract. And then this is a change for this year. Starting this year, you will receive your full award at the beginning of the project after we've seen that contract come in. In the past, you used to get 80% upfront and then 20% after you've done your report, but that is a big change that we're making this year, that we're paying everything out at the beginning of your project. You'll need to acknowledge the grant on all of your marketing materials. There'll be a credit line that's in your grant contract that you need to use. You may also need to use this Minnesota Legacy logo, depending on the source of the funds that we awarded to you. And all of these credit materials will be sent to you, so you don't have to worry about, what do I need to put? But we certainly can answer those questions for you as well. If you're working on your project and something comes up and you need to make some sort of change, please talk to us. It's not a big deal. Things happen. You know, somebody could get sick and you need to extend out your whole timeline. Maybe an item you were going to purchase is no longer available, things like that. So contact us and we might be able to extend your project end date. We can approve some changes to your budget because we do want you to spend out the full amount that we gave you. So if something, you're no longer able to purchase something, we can help you come up with something else to spend that money on that's in the same spirit of the project, things like that. But anyway, don't freak out if something happens where you're going to need to make some changes. That's very easy to do. We get a fair amount of questions about this, so no worries. Your final report will be due 60 days after your project end date, so you have plenty of time to put that together. But it's a good idea when you are just starting your project to just take a look through that report so you have an idea what kind of stuff you'll need to be gathering during your project. So that's kind of the whole process of the grant. And I can open things up again here for any questions that you have, or you want to talk a little bit more about a specific project that you have in mind.
I have a question, Carolyn. So we have a filmmaking class that we were running, and it was part of a lift program through the schools. Launch Your Career Today, I think is what it's called. And we had like 4 students, and they were interviewing seniors. And the idea was all of the filmmaking kinds of things, and then the end product was something for the family, or something that we could have a viewing of for the community, a story of this elder in the community, which would be of interest, local interest. So that's kind of the whole framework.
With the final product, the long range goal would be to have a library of these human interest stories in the center itself.
So my question is, it said no, that education wasn't related, but there's an education. It had to be, if a school, it had to be a community project of sorts.
Yeah. So if any of these activities that you have are actually counting towards the kids' schooling, that is not eligible.
Okay.
It would have to be totally separate from school for them to participate.
Okay. Now, so you're a little bit different than the Minnesota State Arts Board then on that issue?
Yeah, the State Arts Board and all of the regional arts councils kind of have their own programs and rules, although there obviously are some that are across the board. But in this case, it's really, there isn't anything school related that would be eligible for this.
Okay, okay.
Any other questions? I know we're just about at the end of our time. I can stick around for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, feel free to email me or grab some time on my calendar if there's more you'd like to talk about.
I do have a question.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if social media is considered part of arts at all.
How would you be using it?
I guess like, so if we were to want to, the organization that I'm with is in Horizons Crisis Center. We serve victims of, you know, any type of crime and sexual assault. And I wanted to educate our communities more on like what advocacy is, and then also on like different topics about what we do, and then also different topics about, you know, like you were talking about the underserved populations. And you know, I had this Ask an Advocate conversation series in mind, and it would be like a weekly series. And basically, like, it's a video of an advocate speaking with, for example, like somebody from the LGBTQ plus club, and then just like talking about a whole variety of different topics, so that, you know, people in the public know what that looks like and what we do. So I'm wondering if that is something that you would consider to be an option for a project.
I think that would have a really hard time going over as arts.
Okay.
I'm sure there are arts things you could do that would be sort of combined learning, where they're learning about, what was that? We recently had a grant that had specific activities working with people who were suicide survivors. But it was like the actual activities taking place were arts related.
Right. And that's something that we thought about too, is doing, you know, kind of like bringing in like a local artist that could maybe do some classes like with, you know, victim survivors.
Yeah, I think
And
that's
then,
more along the lines of what we
yeah.
could fund.
Okay. And also, like, are we able to, you know, if we were to do something like inviting an artist to, you know, do this like with victim survivors, could we do like several of those?
Yeah,
Okay,
you
because
really,
we want, because we want to make sure that we're reaching people.
yeah, you really are just
you
kind
know,
of limited by budget wise, I guess. So
okay.
we have lots of groups that will apply for, here are all of our fall arts activities that we're doing as one grant.
Oh, that's awesome. I really like that. That's good to know. So there is this creative writing workshop that I have participated in myself. It's offered through another organization in the state, and they offer accommodations. And one of those accommodations is like a childcare stipend, so that victim survivors can attend. So it's like, is that something that we can include in our budget?
Yeah, that can be part of your costs.
Oh, okay, cool.
As long as the ultimate activity is art related.
Right. Okay. And then also, does everything need to be in person, or is it possible to do it over, let's say like we were to do, you know, the paint thing, and then also do like a writing workshop? Could we do like one online and then the other one in person?
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Well, I think we will sign off here now, but if anybody has any more questions, again, please feel free to email me or grab some time on my calendar. So thanks for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you.